Hello and welcome back. Today I'm continuing my segment on vacationing, tips and tricks when vacationing with autism and or other disabilities in your party. This time we're going to continue second part out of two on transportation. Last time we looked at pluses and minuses to various forms of transportation. This time we're looking at surviving various forms of transportation, tips and tricks, and how to make each one a little bit easier. We're going to go through them in the same order. If you didn't see it last time, the order was boats, trains, buses, personal vehicles, I call it cars, but personal vehicles, planes, and then wrapping up at the end before we move on to the next topic in the next video when we get to the series again. So, without further ado, let's get down to it. All right. All right. So, boats. So, as with every form of transportation, there are some things that'll carry over from one thing to another, or with most. And in this case, the first thing on this list is a survival mechanism that will tip or trick that will carry over to everything on this list. And that is what I've called autism survival bags, or just survival bags. And they're something that some of you already have and use in your daily life. And I have already done a video on them. I have a link down in the description, but a brief summary, they are bags with things that help you get through the day. They help you survive, in quotes, when you are outside of the house. Things like water, stim objects, snacks, extra meds, recovery meds, Tylenol, doodling devices if you like to doodle, lots of various little things, and that's a minimum list, or tailored to the individual. Maybe comfy objects, stuffed animals, blankets. Depends on the individual and what they need. Again, I've done a video on it before. Link is down in the description. They're super helpful, super awesome. Even if the individual doesn't have autism, they can be really helpful, again, for individuals such as myself and younger individuals or just other individuals who do have it. Super awesome, super helpful, and can make travel, whether it's daily or vacation travel, a lot less stressful and a lot easier, including by boat. And then another one that's going to show up on this list, and I will reference again in brief, again on other topics, is contacting with a paper trail. This is the least fun, or one of the least fun things for preparing and making things easier when traveling. And this, it's really important though, is reaching out, whether it's by phone or by email or in person, and contacting and talking with travel groups or travel agencies and making sure you have a paper trail written and with what to expect as far as accommodations, as far as what to expect for timetables and all of that, so that you have it in writing from the transportation group, especially if it's accommodation based, what to expect and what they will be providing for you, for your family, for your loved ones, for your friends. And if it's by phone, making sure that they're going to send, writing your own notes, including a reference number, and making sure that they send you some kind of a written synopsis of what will be provided for you, and reaching out, especially if it's by email, and getting confirmation that's written about what to expect, if possible, as much as possible, and printing out these things. Having them physical hard copy is helpful, and having a digital backup with you is, or the physical hard copy is the backup in case something like there's no internet connection, no cell phone connection, what have you, you're in a dead zone, as they call it, and you can't get the internet connection or your file's corrupted, what have you, you have the physical backup to help you when you're there in person to say, hey, should something go wrong, you can say, hey, what's up with this? Let's talk. Let's work this through. Let's get this going. Let's get this smooth and working in a way that benefits everybody, especially those who need these things. And then number 3, another common helpful tip, again, especially traveling by boats, but across all things on this list, this is one that will touch all of them, just like the bags, and that is visual schedules. And a lot of you already use visual schedules with, a lot of you might, not necessarily all of you, but they are helpful to everyone, not just individuals who, again, have autism. And part of the reason for that being so helpful is because they can bridge language barriers. They're used in universal design at times. You see a lot of visual representations of communication because imagery can be more powerful than words, and our brains process images faster than they process words, or they seem to. I need to double check that actually. But if I remember correctly, there's a little asterisk there. If I remember correctly, our brains process images and image-based information faster than they process word-based information. So it can help to have visual schedules to make processing of timetable-based information easier and allow it to be more readily available to update ourselves and the others that we're traveling with about what to expect and what's coming up next at any point in travel for any mode of transportation. And so tacking on to that, something that helps lots of individuals, again, across all modes of transportation, and even with things not in transportation, so this will come up again later in the series, role play. Role play is a near invaluable tool for dealing with, for some individuals, not everyone, not all forms of treatments of stress or coping mechanisms or planning mechanisms or therapeutic tools work for everyone the same way. However, role play can be a very powerful tool for helping to diminish or prevent anxiety, stress, fear, phobias, all of those things. And so it can be a very great asset to families for preparing, families especially, families and individuals for preparing for things like a vacation and situations that are expected to be stressful or new, especially if the individual or family works with, say, a therapist or a trained professional like that to practice role-playing those situations that are expected to be stressful or unexpected and have those sort of anxiety-provoking moments with them. And now for one, since we are on the topic of boats, let's do one that is boat-specific, finally, and that is seasickness. So not everyone deals with seasickness. I know that. I don't. I love the rocking movements of the waves. Not everybody does, and not everybody's body deals with the disconnect between the movements of the waves and the movements of the boats and the static nature of your body and how all those things interplay. That is part of what causes seasickness, and as far as I understand it. And you can work with that in a couple different ways depending on the individual and their body. And there can be therapeutic, from what I understand, and there can be some medicinal or herbal ways to approach it. I would say if you're considering, if you or someone in your party is someone who deals with seasickness, I would say talk with your doctor, and whether they're therapeutic doctors or general practitioners or specialists, talk with them about ways to approach the situation so that you can get professional diagnostic means to approach it and not put your bodies or yourselves at risk. And then tacking on to that, phobias. For those of you who saw the previous video in the series, I have a phobia, not of boats. I love boats. Boats are awesome. I have a phobia of getting on an airplane. I love planes from the ground. I love planes from an engineering perspective. But I don't even talk about getting on an airplane for reasons that if you saw the last video, you got to see a panic attack in action. And just thinking about it, phobias are real. They are genuine fears that are not grounded in knowledge or statistics. For example, I know the statistics about airplanes. Even given recent spikes in the last several months of, statistically, it is still a rather safe form of travel. Travel is still relatively safe. And yet, I have had my entire life a phobia that has only gotten worse over time with attempted treatments. And now you can approach phobias with treatment. Reminder, not everybody responds to all treatments the same way. Like I said, some of my attempts at treating my phobia of airplanes, travel, I don't have a phobia of all airplanes, but a phobia of airplane travel have only made it worse, as opposed to made it, alleviated the situation. And so that means I have to find other modes of travel. That's fine. However, working with professionals, you might find a means of treating a phobia that works for you or someone you love. And if that's something that's worth talking about. However, please, I can't make decisions for you. I recognize that. I do want to beg you to, if possible, please, if possible, don't force yourself. If you have the choice for methods of travel and you can choose any method of travel and someone has a phobia and you have the option to choose a method of travel that is not phobia related, as someone with a phobia of travel, of a mode of travel, and as someone who recognizes that there are people with phobias and phobia levels worse than my own, please don't force yourself or someone else to travel by a method of transportation if their phobia is present, if you have a choice. If you have some other way to travel, I know there's a lot of barriers, time, money, ease, etc., and those can prevent that and make it impossible to choose a non-phobia based travel. I know. But if there is a choice, I'm just putting that out there because as someone with a phobia and someone who cares about other people's mental health, I wouldn't be able to deal with myself if I didn't. So anyway, moving on. As I talked about in the last video, as a negative for boats are floating petri dishes. You've got a lot of people in a contained space for a period of time, and if it's a cruise that stops and docks and then moves to another port, you've got a lot of people commingling in various locations and then gathering back together in a petri dish that's getting new additions of variables at every stop. And so that means that you've got a breeding ground for things like colds, viruses, diseases, sicknesses, etc., etc. And so that means that you want to make sure that you and those you love are at the best place you can be for protecting yourselves in those regards. So that means talk with your doctor, professional doctor, about how to make sure that your body is in the best immune and system shape that it can be, and immune system support, whether it's whatever that may be, vitamins, vitamins, I don't know. That's between you and your doctor. I could not make any kind of recommendations. Talk with your professional doctor and see what ways you can prevent sickness for yourself and others on your vacation, because no one wants to get sick on vacation. No one wants to get sick when they come home from vacation. Whether it's, seasickness or legitimate sickness, no one wants that. It's not fun. And so one last item that's boat specific is swimming lessons. And now I'm putting that on here. You're like, but I'm not going to swim on a boat. I mean, you might if it's a cruise and they have a pool. I know. Or they stop and you're like, I want to swim at the beach. I know. But not every cruise does that, or not every boat does that. But some people do have a little bit of anxiety, even if it's not a phobia or a huge fear that, what if something happens or this? And it's this small thing, especially if you're a parent, the concern for a child, the concern for people you care about. wanting them to be able to have that extra layer of safety on a boat. You're surrounded by water, swimming. I understand that. I know that that's a fear. I know that's a potential concern or worry, or you just feel a little better, sleep a little better at night, knowing that they can swim, even if it's just basic swim. Well, good news is that there is an increasing availability of swim lessons across the United States, including in places where there's no water at all, or it's really hard to get to water. And another good bit on that is that there's an increasing amount of swim lessons that are public, private, or semi-private that are tailored or open to individuals with disabilities or difficulties or anxieties, sensitivities to different things, however you want to. Sometimes I know some people don't like to call themselves, maybe the individual isn't disabled, but they feel sensitive about something about themselves. And that's okay. Maybe it's just a little anxiety about the fact that you're an adult who doesn't know how to swim. These places are okay with that. They're understanding. There's more and more of them, and that's okay. And it's okay to be a little shy about these things. There's nothing wrong with that. If it will help you feel better about your vacation and feel safer to get that extra swim lesson, it's worth pursuing. And there are an increasing number of state groups, and there are some private groups that help with funding for individuals who have disabilities, and there are state and private groups that are worth looking into that might be willing to help individuals who are adults who don't have disabilities or don't have diagnosed disabilities who are looking to get swim lessons, just to try and propagate these skills and grow skills in them, not only in the United States but outside of it. And those are important things to look into. And federal funding for these things in the United States is not something that is guaranteed right now. And I don't know where it's going to be in the future. In the past, it was increasing. Right now, federal funding is being cut at the time of this recording all over the place. And nothing is guaranteed federal funding-wise for anything right now. So that is something worth writing to people about, to push for. I think it's important. However, that's up to you. If that is something that's important to you, I would encourage you to do so. However, that's up to you. Now, moving on. All right, trains. This will be a lot shorter than boats. I know the boat one dragged on a bit. We did need to cover a lot of items that are repeated throughout this. And so I'll just reference those quickly here and there as we go forward. So when traveling by boat with trains on a vacation, it's a good idea to have each person's travel bag in tip-top shape. Communications with a paper trail is important for any and or all accommodations, as well as things like tickets. That's helpful. Visual expectations and timetables are helpful. Consider role-playing any stressful situations that are expected, and work with specialists about things like phobias and or making sure that everyone is in a situation where they are healthy enough for the travel according to doctors and specialists. Excuse me. Unlike boats, where depending on the boat, there can be a lot to do besides enjoying the view, napping, and admiring the technology and engineering. I love technology and engineering. Anywho, socializing on a train, as well as can be the case with, say, buses or planes, you do have to plan a little bit more and bring a little bit more entertainment with yourself on the route, depending on how much you like to do those initial things, such as talking, observing, engineering, looking out a window, napping, eating. I mean, if you can spend all the time of the whole trip doing those things, go for it. But make sure you bring enough stuff or enough sufficient things to entertain yourself or those with you for the rest of that time. And that's really all I had for trains. Not much. When we touched on the wrap-ups from the previous one, the touchbacks. So let's move on to buses. All right, buses. All right, quick, excuse me again. Quick callback reminders. Buses, travel bag, communication paper trail for accommodations and tickets or plans, visual expectations and visual timetables, considering role playing any stressful expectations, situations that are expected, anything that's unexpected that you haven't experienced before that individuals are nervous about, working with specialists about phobias and or health situations, as well as working to make sure that sufficient entertainment and or plans are in place for sitting during the travel. And then with buses, there's one more thing. Because, as I touched on in the previous video in this series, buses are also a wonderful place. I mean that with all of the sarcasm in the world. They're a very difficult place for individuals with containment OCD, which I guess is classified, I don't know if it's classified as a phobia. It's a difficulty for individuals because it can be very debilitating. And so while it may not be a means of eliminating it, one can work to do some preventative measures for it by bringing things like extra hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, maybe a trash bag for those disinfecting wipes, etc., to try and ease the potential of using any amenities on the bus. And there are limits on some of these things being carried onto a plane. I don't know what all those are. We'll touch on some plane stuff. We'll get to planes when we get to planes. So some of these things might be carry over to planes. However, they are potentially very important on buses for individuals with containment OCD. So now, let's move on to your personal vehicles. All right, so this segment, not brought to you by Disney, but brought to you by your own personal vehicle, whether it's cars, trucks, or SUVs, or minivans, or regular vans, or whatever vehicle it is you use. I don't know, personal limo. I don't know, that'd be pretty cool. I don't have that kind of money. Anywho, in traveling in your own vehicle, this is the odd one out in all of the methods of transportation that we cover, as it was in the last video in the series. It's the only one where you and your traveling cohorts have complete control over the vehicle for the most part. And it comes with a set of ups and downs related to that, which, again, talked about in the last video in the series. To make things operate more smoothly for you and those traveling with you, making sure you have those helpful travel schedules, travel bags, visual schedules, visual expectations. With your own vehicle, it does come with it being up to you to figure out where the stops are. That means you need to plan or figure that out as part of the transportation. You don't have to do that before you leave. Some people don't. You just go, okay, we're going from point A to point B, and we'll figure out the stops on the way as we need to. That's fine. You've figured that out. You've covered that. We'll go into this a little bit more in depth, hopefully, later in the series. We'll figure that out. But things to consider: food, bathroom facilities, refueling, rest, stretching your legs, seeing something cool. Like, has anyone seen the 10-foot stone cow out in the cornfield? I mean, I don't know. Whatever floats your fancy. I'm not into giant cow statues. Some people are. Stopping early for the day. Is everyone tired and your plans for the vacation fit? Is everyone ornery in the plans for the vacation fit and you all just decide to stop early for the day? Buying something you forgot to buy. Someone forget to bring water. Someone forget hand sanitizer, if that's your thing. Someone forget diapers. Got a baby that needs diapers. Got whatever you forgot. I don't know, soda, chips, whatever you eat, whatever you need. I don't know. That's between you and your your traveling group. Whatever. Also, taking your own vehicle on longer trips, it pays to plan for things to go wrong. You don't have to. With any of the things on this list. Anything that I recommend, you don't have to do. That's sort of a worldly rule of, I guess you would call it a worldly rule of duh, or an axiom. Maybe it's an axiom, whatever. You don't have to take anyone's advice, including mine. However, I would recommend you plan as much as you can for these. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it. I'd recommend you check out with your car insurance company about some kind of roadside assistance. A lot of car insurance companies might have some kind of roadside assistance stipulation. Some do, some don't. And if you don't have like AAA or one of their competitors, which they have some, I don't know them off the top of my head, but we've all seen AAA commercials. They exist. They have competitors. I think AARP has some services that are similar and some other, etc. You get what I'm saying. Or find some kind of temporary roadside assistance provider and plan or program and see about getting one in place for your trip so that if something should go wrong with the vehicle you're using, you have some kind of plan or service in place to help you get through the rest of your trip smoothly. And finally, for your personal vehicle, if you have someone traveling with you that doesn't normally travel with you, this I guess is a double whammy. So it's not, if you have someone traveling with you who doesn't normally travel with you, or the fact that when you travel on a vacation, things are normally different anyway. It's helpful to review expectations as far as the travel itself for you and your traveling group, your family, your friends, whatever your makeup is again, and reminders about what to expect, how are we going to communicate with each other, if you need to stop and use the restroom, if the music's too loud, what are options if you don't like the music, can someone wear headphones, what are needs of individuals in the vehicle, what are there allergies in the vehicle, etc., 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 etc. And as we'll talk later in the series, stuff will come up on your vacation. Something always comes up in life, and that includes on vacation, including stress. There are things we can definitely do to minimize that, and that's part of this video, is to reduce stress, to plan for things, to help things go smoothly. And stress comes up, and that's okay. It's okay to have stress. Again, we'll deal with stress, recovering from stress, all of that stuff in a later video in this series. However, how do we communicate those things, and planning for the communication of stress, literal, emotional low batteries, literal low batteries, full bladders, whatever, and how do you convey norms of, or expectations, I can talk, I promise, expectations of traveling in the vehicle together as a group and agree on those things before you pull out of whatever driveway or parking lot that you start in. All right, so next we're going to move on to plane travel. Here we go. All right, with airplanes, we need to make sure each person has their travel bag in tip-top shape, communications and paper trail for all accommodations, tickets, all that stuff, visual expectations, visual timetables, considering role-playing stressful situations, talking with doctors and specialists, and like trains and buses, making sure that you have sufficient entertainment. Now, surprise. Due to my phobia of getting on an airplane, that I briefly discussed in my previous video and earlier in this one, check it out. If you want to learn more about that phobia, and I think it's a benefit, you should go check out the video anyway. I'm going to be passing the baton here about flying by planes and tips and tricks here to someone else in the field who has a different perspective. She's another great professional in this field, another great advocate for individuals with autism and disability. She's focused purely in the autism community, and she's also someone who I think does great work. We have a different focus. She is focused on the therapeutic end. I am focused more on tools and architecture, which allows me to feel like I can point off to her in this moment. And because we're essentially working for the same goal. And her name is Kaylin Partlow. Some of you may know her from Love on the Spectrum, I think it is. And she does her own work. She's a great advocate. She's written some books. I have a link to a short down in the description that she did on this subject specifically, with some tips and tricks that I think are great and will be super beneficial to any and all of you who want some tips and tricks for flying. And I really recommend that you check her out. And if you could, give a shout out to my work over there, and let, any help sharing my work would be great. Especially since I'm still in the starting phases. And speaking on that, traveling on vacations can be difficult. See my phobia, see all of the stuff we've talked about. These are just some of the little things that can help. These are just some of, talk about some of the bumps. And in the last video, we only talked about some of the difficulties, ups and downs. But there's a lot that can happen, and I'm sure I missed something. And if I did, please let me know. And if you have tips and tricks that you'd love to share, please let me know down in the comments, and let other people know. The information that we can get out to help each other to travel better and more efficiently as individuals with disabilities and varying needs and varying abilities, and to make this world more accessible, more equitable, more open, more truly free, is awesome. And I'd love to have more of that conversation, and I'd love to have more of that shared between all of us. So if you could throw some of that down in the comments section, that would be great. If you could let me know what you thought about the video, that would be great. And again, because the biggest thing you can do to support my channel if you liked it is, well, the two biggest things is, one, liking the video and subscribing. That helps the channel because it helps the algorithm, and it helps you stay up to date with new videos from my channel. But even more so, or just as equally, I don't know which, is sharing this video and other stuff I've done here on this channel with other people that you think might find it interesting or helpful. And that would help me a lot. And if you stick around to the end of this video after the next little bit, you'll get some recommendations from YouTube on on more related content that the algorithm thinks you will find helpful or interesting. And so one last thing though, before we go, I do want to say thank you for watching. And I mean that. And I want to let you know that I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you and your family are here, and your loved ones, even if they're not traditional family. And I want to make sure that you know that you are loved and they are loved, that you matter, that everything you and they do makes a difference and an impact, and that your lives make an impact. And I know, as an individual who has autism and who is a parent of individuals who have autism, I have other disabilities as well. Life can be, and even for individuals who don't have disabilities or disorders, life can be and often is incredibly difficult and unforgiving. And if you're in a place that is, and even if you're in a place that isn't difficult and unforgiving right now, I just want you to know that you're not alone. and that you and your loved ones and everything you're fighting for are worth it, and that you matter, and you always will. All right? I'll see you next time.